George won F2 in a season where Alex Albon was driving, where Lando Norris was driving. This guy is no joke.
If George is, 10-2 against Lewis in qualifying earlier on in the season, right? Again, unreal F2 season, back-to-back, blah, 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 right? If he's that guy, why would Toto be flirting so hard with Max?
We all love F1 for our different things. You see me, I love rivalry and I love hating. And at the end of the day, George Russell's trying to take food from Lewis Hamilton's plate. I can't respect that. I can't. So if George Russell does things that takes food from Lewis Hamilton's plate, I'm sorry, that's going to upset me.
All I know is this, that there is Teo Pourchaire, who's just won an F2 championship. Felipe Drugovich is sat on the bloody sidelines doing whatever else. Again, another F2 champion. And we keep celebrating mediocrity in the form of bloody Checo and Logan and Zhou Guan.
Who are you putting in the car then, Cam?
Mate, anyone, Tomo, it's not even a question.
Who? No. Who?
No, I Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown Podcast. With me, as always, my brother, the guy that they call Chezinho, otherwise known as the A-side, and we have two special guests in the house. Some chap called Tomo, you may know him from the goatiest YouTube channel to ever have goated. 400,000 something subscribers. I can't keep track now, mate. It may as well be. We round up. Do you know what I mean? We round up around here, Tomo. And the one they call Nasha of Quick Stop F1 fame, again, one of the goatiest podcasts.
I was going to say, yeah. Can I wanted a bit of sauce on my team too.
I'm giving it to you, Nasha. I'm trying to give it to you, but I'm being rudely interrupted. One of the goatiest YouTubers and F1 podcasters to ever have done it. And put some respect on Shazino's name as well, representing for the Tired F1 pod. How are we doing, chaps? It doesn't matter how you are doing, because we need to talk about some F1-age. There's a lot kicked off. Nasha, I'm going to come to you first, chap, because I know you've got some things to say about King George Russell of Kingsling, Norfolk. First of his name. Talk to me about the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend, because one suspects that you had some things to say, ergo that King George might have been gifted himself a 25 points, but for the cheeky DQ, and in doing so, sabotaging one Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. To that, sir, you respond how?
Thank you, Cameron, for giving me the floor for that, and much appreciated. It's always a pleasure to be here on your goatiest of goatist channels, and obviously, I'm just really and truly, I'm only here to see Shazinho, to be honest. Like I'm gassed right now. To your question, what I would say is, I think in F1 there's a problem where I don't think people can conceptualize that two things can be right at the same time. And if I say one thing that is correct, it doesn't mean that the other thing is wrong. Therefore, was George's strategy a great strategy for George Russell? Yes. Was it a drive which, with the information we had at the time, before the disqualification, as he crossed the line, you could go and look back on the Quick Stop F1 Twitter feed. And I literally said, that's, to quote a brother of mine, the sporting excellence that I can respect, because what I witnessed was a man who defied the odds, defied the data, defied everything to get that car into first place and holding off a 7-time world champion, his teammate, under extreme pressure. We've seen George, how many times have we seen George lock up a wheel, go wide, fail to bring home a position when he is in control? Singapore last year, as hilarious as that was not something that is out of the ordinary for George. So with the information we had at the time, all of those things, yes, incredible for George. However, what is also true is that with the information that we know now, that strategy did screw over Lewis Hamilton. That is an actual fact. The reasons for that are that because everyone thought that this strategy was so fanciful, was so impossible, Lewis wasn't even being fed information on George Russell until it was too late. And then he had to not only think about his tyres whilst thinking about Piastri, who he was being fed information about. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, by the way, George isn't going to come in. You're actually not in the net lead. You're now in second. You've got to chase him down. By the way, if you could leave some space, please. And again, going up to the back of him, everyone just assumed he'd go past. But if you look at the Belgian Grand Prix, you look at what we saw, it was impossible to pass, really and truly, unless you had a massive delta or, cold tires, hot, warm tires coming out of the pits, etc. So what I would say regarding that is the information that Mercedes gave to Lewis meant that he was fighting with one hand behind his back. And if you're in a team, fine. If you're going to give someone an alternative strategy to be able to do what they're going to do, at least either listen to your driver who says they don't want to come in. B, if you're going to make him come in to cover an undercut, immediately give him the information that George is thinking of a one-stop, George is doing a one-stop. At least let a driver who doesn't have all the information make the decisions in the car that he needs to run his race. And that didn't happen. And it's not the first time it's happened. And I think that's why a lot of Lewis Hamilton fans were rightly peeved, because their vested interest is in Lewis Hamilton winning. That doesn't mean that what George did was not right for George Russell, but it wasn't right for Lewis Hamilton. And I would argue, really and truly, now we know everything, making someone push to defend against their teammate instead of reserving their tires, making someone sweat a bit more, making someone run down their plank a bit more, defending against their teammate, in hindsight, wasn't the best decision to make for George Russell. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. And I'm keen to hear what everyone else has to say about that.
Tomo, let me pitch the question you thus, because I think this is a really interesting point. Do you think Lewis Hamilton fans do the god tier driver that is Lewis Hamilton a disservice by expecting George Russell in his infancy as an F1 driver, he's not final form yet, to be Lewis Hamilton's handmaiden? He's an F1 driver, he acts in his own interest. Tomo, chime in on that.
Cameron, sorry, Tom.
What's this?
Go on, Yasha. Go on.
No, but did I imply that, Cameron? I don't think I did.
No. All right. So to be fair, you said, how I'll interpret what you said, Nasha, was that two things can be mutually exclusive, but you almost, I want to say, you justified the angst of some Lewis Hamilton fans.
I think the angst is against the team allowing George to run that strategy,
but Nasha, and this is where I struggle, Nasha, because I know that you are a die-hard F1 fan going back to the early 90s, etc. So you more than even me understand what F1 is, and it is a killer of a sport. Obviously, you've got this this weird divergence of agency in that you've got to do what Lando did the other weekend in being a team player, but you've also got to go for yours as a driver. George Russell is nothing if not a killer, Nasha. So he's always so he's always gonna go for his. He wants every single session to win and beat Lewis Hamilton, probably the latter more than the former. So how can I don't even like George Russell, is the truth, Nasha. But how can I hate him for wanting to beat Lewis Hamilton and get himself 25 points? I can't even hate the team. He did a god tier strategy. It was a slick move in real time, leveraging a 200 IQ racing brain that I didn't even know he had. So how can I think it's nonsense to hate it. Am I upset that Lewis Hamilton didn't win?
Let me interject.
Let's go, Tommy.
Look, at the end of the day, George Russell, first of all, he was running fifth. So he had nothing to lose by running this like crazy strategy, right? If you throw enough at a wall, eventually it will stick. I remember in 22 in Japan, Latifi and Vettel got caught out on lap one, like turn one. They pitted early. It was one of them changeable weather. And actually, them getting caught up at the start actually meant they had a better finish to the race. So you can have, when you're in that position, like Vettel and Latifi in 22 in Suzuka, they were just like, well, we might as well chuck it in the pits now. We've got nothing to lose. And it pays off. Sometimes it does pay off. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't think you can't always attribute to malice what you can attribute to, not necessarily stupidity from Mercedes, right? But they clearly didn't. I think they clearly expected Lewis to just be able to drive past George. They didn't expect the one stop to work in the first place. It wasn't just them. No one did. Carlos Sainz was thinking about it, and even he didn't go for it. I think I understand, like, Lewis drove a pretty faultless race and he outqualified George and put himself in a position, but also by putting yourself in that position in the same way that it can be a disadvantage to be ahead of a car behind, because the car behind can react. They can pit. If you don't pit, box opposite, whatever. And in that position, Lewis to go for a one stop would have had to feel very confident in a strategy that not a single team across the grid was confident in. So that would have had to come. That the only way that's getting called is if Lewis is like, no, I can definitely do a one stop. Lewis said post race he had loads left in his tires. I just looking at everything now and post race, even if they had said to Lewis a little bit earlier or been a bit more transparent with exactly what George was doing, I don't know if Lewis could have done anything more. And the fact that if Mercedes knew that he was going to be 1.5 kilos under the minimum weight, so it was at least 1.5 kilos lighter than Lewis by the end, probably more, like they clearly just were like, well, George has gone for it. Hopefully we'll be fine. I mean, it's a P5. It could be a P. He went for the win. He ended up coming up short. If not, the weight is getting pinged for. He's almost certainly getting pinged for plank wear. Not that everyone gets measured for plank wear every race. That's the difference, because obviously when Lewis and Charles got pinged for it in Austin, that was because it's kind of random. They say it's random checks. Like sometimes they check, sometimes they don't. So I just think Mercedes didn't have the information for George to tell him to like chill out, mate. Like let's just get a podium and save and save weight. But even then, like they take a fuel sample out. The car's meant to be a certain weight without the fuel. So he's obviously run through the plank / run through the tires, just bolt on a new set at the end and get and at least get some points. But George is guy for hell for leather. There's no drivers' championship to fight for him. It's purely constructors. He went for it. Mercedes just kind of making it up as they go along, and it ended up meaning that the team got a 1-2, which ultimately, when you're not fighting for a drivers' championship, every single constructors' position matters, but only one drivers' championship position matters. Lewis got his win in Silverstone. I think Mercedes, I can understand why they'd be like, you know what, George, do your thing. It didn't pay off. Sometimes these things work out, sometimes they don't.
I don't hate it personally. I just think, as much as I dislike George, I just don't. Something about him rubs me up the wrong way. There is an air of entitlement, but overall, as you alluded to earlier, Nasha, I'm invested in the upper echelons of sporting endeavour, and how can I? It would be unfair of me then to characterise George's drivers anything other than exceptional, both from a race IQ standpoint, a race management standpoint, tyre whisperer settings. Ultimately, he got the job done, didn't he? I was just like, you know what? I can't. I would have loved for Lewis to nail it on track. That would have made me really happy. But I don't know. I've got to respect it. Right, George is going to George.
Well, I think like the wet running in practice sessions, it was clear as day how much that affected every team's analysis of what would actually happen on the day, because they didn't get that dry running in representative conditions. Like the fact that George was able to stay ahead of Lewis with DRS and could get traction out of turn one. Like George was in that first little traction zone out of turn one, George was pulling ahead of Lewis, like significantly enough to hold him off with DRS, and that shows how badly. Because Lewis knows how to get an exit out of turn one at Spa and overtake at the end of the Mulsanne straight. Like he knows how to do that. But that just showed how well these hard tyres hung on and how much it completely caught everyone out.
Yeah.
Also, clean air is king, as our good friend
100%.
Oscar Piastri put it.
Never more than at Spa last weekend. Who knew? Shez, talk to me, sir. Where do you sit on that fence? Are you do you respect George for being selfish, for being an F1 driver, or do you think he needs to offer more deference to one Sir Lewis, Carl, Davidson, Hamilton?
Well, no, objectively, there's no reason that George Russell needs to show deference to a driver that's going to leave at the end of the season. And in terms of where they are in the championship this season and what they can achieve at the end, why not go for the win? I don't really understand the argument that he needed to move aside, other than Mercedes had an inkling that given that they were on a one stop, he was going to be underweight at the end of the race. And I still find it a little bit difficult to believe that they didn't realize that being the only team really to have they weren't the only team actually, were they? I think did Fernando go onto a one stop as well?
Laps, yeah.
but Alonso wasn't fighting for his life, right? Whereas George was trying to keep a raging 7-timer behind him. But if you're talking about this purely as a sporting contest, George did what he always does, which is very much think about how can I mold the strategy to do the best for me, and sometimes that means that he just thinks about the here and now, not looking further into the future. I don't think it always pays off for him, but on this occasion, it definitely did on track.
No. After you're done, Shez, after you're done.
Yeah. I think it definitely did on track. And we have complained a lot about drivers like Charles Leclerc and even Lewis not calling the optimum strategy for themselves on race day. To then say to George, "Oh, you're not allowed to do that," I think is disingenuous. And takes away, as Nash has said, from what was a really, really good performance. Now, again, even on that, it was probably a little bit easier to do what he did when you look at it in hindsight. When I was watching it in the race, I thought, wow, he's managed to do the one thing that he hasn't been able to do, which is keep his tires alive. But actually, that whole free air is king, the degradation, the DRS zone, all of that conspired to make it a bit easier for him to do what he did. But he still had to call it in real time and live with the knowledge that with the assumption that he wouldn't be able to keep that position. So yes, I think George did a great job. Yes, I think he's allowed to call his own strategy. And yes, once it was on the cards that George could win that race, I think it's absolutely fair and right that he's allowed to defend that position, despite Lewis pulling off a blinder of a race. I think he was far and away my driver of the day.
100%.
On Sunday. He was undone by a strategy that he couldn't have known was going to work. And as you guys have said, no other team on the grid thought was going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But don't we need to put more? So I was thinking about it after the race, right? And the DQ is really unfortunate. But don't we need to put some more? Lewis driver of the day, 100%. But you expect this from Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, etc., etc. That's Lewis. But George, I feel like George finds himself, Tomo, in a predicament at the moment. Every time Toto, the boy who cried wolf, has a microphone in front of his face, every other word is Andrea Kimi Antonelli and Maximilian Verstappen. And 3 doesn't go into 2. George Russell doesn't even have a contract past 2025. Now it's blame game settings. A couple of races back during quali, it was like George didn't follow the program. He wasn't quick enough. I empathise with George, and I think that makes his performance, Tomo, at the Belgian Grand Prix even better now. True or false?
No, I mean, we know Toto's got it in his locker to use. I mean, Bottas was only ever given 1-year extensions because Toto thought that would make him perform more. Maybe for Valtteri, that wasn't the case. And I think he's right to put pressure on George because, as Nyasha outlined, like he has made a number of high-profile mistakes and had these kind of bottle moments that, you know, you've got to iron out. Otherwise, you will become known for that for the rest of your career. And I think he's right because, I mean, look, if Toto can get Max, there is no doubt in Max's ability and his talent, and the fact that Toto's got history with Max and wanted him back then, that all plays into it. And Kimi Antonelli's had the most impressive junior resume in recent memory, right? More so than any of the, you know, Leclercs or the Russells or any of these guys who have come through. So I think there's nothing to lose from Toto putting the pressure on George. I think he should put the pressure on George because he's only got 2 seats to fill. He's not got a junior team well, Williams maybe used to be, but not so much anymore. Now they've got Albon and Sargent, and Vowles, I think, has made a statement of intent there that this is a serious independent team. They might run Mercedes engines, but they want to do what McLaren have been able to do going forward. So Mercedes don't have that luxury. He's got potentially 3 assets there. I think absolutely should be putting the pressure on George. And George has been in Formula One long enough now. You know, he thinks he only needed one year at Williams. He got 3, eventually got into that Mercedes. I can imagine that must have stung. He's watched, you know, Lewis and Valtteri fighting at the front in those 2 years of the 3 that he thought he should have been in the Mercedes already. He jumps in and he gets, well, we won't remind the people of that 2022 Mercedes. I'm sure that'll bring up a few, I can see the whites of your eyes, Nyasha, for that one.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
The spine shaker that was. So, yeah, I think Toto should. I think it's up to George to respond to that. You know, the greats would not buckle under that pressure. Will George Russell? Again, I think he did a great job keeping Lewis behind in Spa. He did a great job. You know, you look at Brazil when he won in 22 as well, kept Lewis at bay with that pressure lap after lap after lap. He can bottle it, but also he has demonstrated he has done it on a number of occasions. So game's the game. 3 don't go into 2.
Oof, the game is indeed the game. Shez, talk to me about George, because I remember we were arguing a couple of races back when I was trying to understand the qualifying head-to-head. I said something's got to be going on there between Lewis and George, because the Lewis that I know could never be like 10-2 down in qualifying versus George Russell. And you responded to me then that I'm underestimating George and his pace in absolute terms, that you think he might be potentially the quickest on the grid, even quicker than Charles Leclerc. Shez, you still think that?
I think it's very easy to underestimate George Russell. I don't really understand how we are talking about a driver that, as you say, until very recently was 10-2 up against the greatest qualifier of all time, right? A driver that is one of only 4 or 5 drivers that have won F2 in their rookie season and has won F3 in their rookie season. He did the same thing that Piastri did coming up the ranks, right? You're telling me that Kimi Antonelli has a great junior record. He's won 4 F4 titles, right? And he's struggling currently in F2 for like a variety of different reasons. You can put that down to Prima if you want to, but he's not bossing that championship. And George won F2 in a season where Alex Albon was driving, where Lando Norris was driving. This guy is no joke. And to think that we're now saying that he is at risk of losing his seat to a guy that's struggling in F2, I think is absolute madness, right? He shouldn't even have to think about this. And I get where the anxiety is for Mercedes. Like Toto's super, like he's losing sleep over the fact that he might lose another guy like he did Verstappen, right? And he's doing everything he can to try and not let that happen again. And on the other hand, he's trying to get Max in the car. I think having a Max versus George lineup is formidable. Can you imagine the powerhouse that would be?
Chaos as teammates,
but it would be brilliant.
It'd be
George
sick
versus
entertainment.
Lewis is bad.
Oh my god,
Mate, it would be so
Christ.
much fun. Can you imagine? Like it would be like Lewis and Rosberg on absolute raging.
Is that what Toto
steroids.
wants? Is that what Toto wants? Like,
I don't care what Toto wants.
I think he inherited Hamilton and Rosberg, and I don't think he ever really wanted that. I don't think that was optimal for him, and he found a balance in Hamilton and Bottas, where Bottas would out-qualified Lewis 30% of the time, but it was a no-brainer. It was easy.
Tomo, I think look, in this situation, if you can get Max in your car and you've got George, the performance is the key, right? You would take that level of driver performance 10 days out of 10 and just work out whatever you need to work out in terms of this is our sporting etiquette. This is our driving etiquette. You're allowed to do this in this particular situation. Have them sign a contract. Do whatever the heck you need. But you would have those two in your car if you could have them. I think
you're taking Max from a competitor, aren't you? Like as well as getting him in your team.
So you're weakening them.
Yeah.
Right. The only spanner in the works I can see is if in 2025 they don't get Max, they stick Kimi in the car. Then I think it becomes an audition for 2026 for both of them. I think it becomes if Max is serious about leaving Red Bull in the new rules era, then it becomes an audition for George versus Kimi, who can come out on top, whether potentially or actually, for them to make a decision.
All I would say, right, is if George, and I'm not saying he isn't, if George is, 10-2 against Lewis in qualifying earlier in the season, right? Again, unreal F2 season, back-to-back, blah, 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 right? If he's that guy, why would Toto be flirting so hard with Max? I feel like if George gave no reason for Toto to doubt, why would he go after? Why would he make two clear number ones? Because otherwise, why wasn't he doing that when it was Valtteri and Lewis? Why wasn't he flirting with Max then?
But they've already got two number ones. But they've already got two number ones right now. Like Lewis isn't a number
Lewis
two, is he?
And Kimi will be a number two when he comes in.
But he's had 2 seasons, 22 and 23, where they have had two number ones in the car. And it's not like they weren't expecting to be fighting for a championship in 2022. They absolutely were. And they were still happy to have two number ones in the car. I don't think they're scared of that.
I don't think George came into the team on two number one status.
True.
I don't think this is. I don't think he thinks that.
I think the results meant that they got treated equally, and I think there are caveats to that. But the results were the results. But George's, if you go back to George's, how he was talking about being there, I'm here with my idol. I'm here to learn. I'm here to, and of course, it's all obviously it's PR.
Just chat. It's just
PR.
chat.
And of course, Mercedes have never said this is number one, number two. But I think George earned the right to parity in 22. So, I'm just saying.
What else can you expect a driver to do? Valtteri had to do the same thing. If Valtteri had that level of performance, it's just they knew he wouldn't.
But was he signed with that pretense that he will match Lewis? I don't think that was that expectation, because also, I think they had to promote him, otherwise they were going to lose him.
I don't know about that.
Can I just say,
George was their future, isn't he?
Can I just say also, when the car is good, look where the results go, and that's a fact. Like, that happened last season, and it's happening this season again. When the car is good and the car is drivable, and the car doesn't need to have tweaks from Friday to Saturday to Sunday, and it's in a place where it's night and day, which is why Toto Wolff is looking for a replacement for him potentially, because if respectfully the car is good and you can't beat Lewis, then what is the point of me having you there if Lewis is down the road in another car?
Okay, to that specific question about why would I get Max when I've already got George, if George is that good. Look, there are 3 drivers on the grid right now that do not have world championships that we all think potentially could have world championships, and they all have flaws. Lando Norris can't get past first lap, is a little bit too timid when it comes to wheel. Charles Leclerc, like George Russell, when there isn't a car, he's nowhere. Like he drops it spectacularly, and
I'm glad.
And as you say, Cameron has a little bit of I'll just do what the team says, and George Russell has this thing where he's spectacularly fast on a Saturday, but on a Sunday makes mistakes. But all of these guys will be tempered by winning a championship. The one thing that Max has, and Lewis
hasn't
has,
been tempered by winning a championship.
But he knows what it takes to win a world championship. He knows that his driving is fine. It will still allow him to do that. And that is the big thing that Max has over anyone else on the grid, is that he already has tenure. He knows how to win a championship. He has proven that. All the others are still trying to get there. They win one championship, I think that all changes.
You know what? Here's what I'll say, just to put a pin in the George talk. I still think that on the back of his performance, for all his foibles and the cheeky unforced error and the pseudo brake test in Australia and Singapore last year, sometimes he doesn't chew his automotive food before he swallows, 100%. But I still think Toto Wolff needs to put some more respect on that chap's name. Get behind him. I think he's been too harsh, Tomo. Like, he's still young. He's beat Sir Lewis Hamilton one season, notwithstanding all the upgrades and extra weight that Lewis was taking. Still, that's got to be, if Lewis is who we think he is, that's got to be worth something. Get behind King George Russell, therefore, Toto, and stop being such a, I'm going to get Max and Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Meanwhile, George only has a contract till 2025. I think that's flagrant disrespect.
But also, if George is that guy, then he won't buckle to that pressure, and he'll still get the job done, and he'll make it clear that he is the guy to back.
Yeah,
I would love to see George Russell under some real pressure, for real, over the course of a season. I would love to see that. Respectfully, I would no, but I'm saying because, as we've all said, Belgium was an anomaly, and we now know why it was an anomaly. So I would like to see what we saw in Belgium. I like to see that repeated again and again and again and again in a high pressure situation. Having said that, I trust George Russell to perform better in those type of high stakes situations than I do Lando Norris, than I do Charles Leclerc. 100%, and that's not a knock on George. Look, again,
but that's a big compliment that you've just paid him there, Nasha.
Look, because you know what, I feel like I came in on this show, I thought we were gonna have a lovely chat about F1, and it was a setup, bruv. Like, you ambushed me.
What were you expecting, Yasha? Come on.
And then you put words in my mouth, and you made me just sit here and listen to everyone talk about the words that were not in my mouth. So what I will say is that I have a lot of respect for George as a driver, but in F1, it's eat or be eaten. And you know what? We all love F1 for our different things. You see me, I love rivalry and I love hating. And at the end of the day, George Russell's trying to take food from Lewis Hamilton's plate. I can't respect that. I can't. So if George Russell does things that takes food from Lewis Hamilton's plate, I'm sorry, that's going to upset me. And that doesn't make me a less F1 fan for that. Like I said, I can accept what George Russell did was right for him. And I can accept George Russell. Look, again, go and look at my tweets when we signed Russell. I was gassed. Like, this guy, for me, I think George Russell, if he was driving against anyone else on the grid bar Max, we'd be talking about him as next up. He's the next guy. Like, he's the one who's going to win a championship next after Lewis and Max, whatever. He's an incredible driver. He has his floor shares, and I hope, what I think, to be honest, is that if he does have that team leader role and he's comfortable within that, and he doesn't have to try too hard, and he doesn't have to keep looking across the garage and seeing like this level of ability and achievements and power and whatever stature within the sport, I think it will calm him a lot. And I think the errors that we do see will reduce. And I think he'll have the car built towards his specifications more. And I think what we see when the Mercedes develops is that it sometimes develops away from George, which is why his pace in the race would be slower, because the car is being tuned up to Lewis Hamilton's liking, because, you know, he's Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, look, I'm interested. I'd love for George to stay at Mercedes and you know, and be able to grow into that team leader role. I think it's something. George is a prefect, bruv. He's been dreaming about being head boy in charge for his whole life. So I think it'd be good for him. And I think it'd be good for the sport as well to see George lead a team like Mercedes, especially if they're that good. I don't want to see Max go to Mercedes. You signed your death row contract at Red Bull. Stay there. Build the team back up again. You can't just jump ship every time. When the car's shit, you can't just jump ship. You can start exercising clauses. Stay there. You said you wanted to stay.
You can, Nasha, if you Max stay there. Mate, what are you talking? Hold on, Nasha. When did he say
he said he wanted to stay at Mercedes forever?
Mate, this is true. There you go, Tomo. Wow. Hang on, Nasha. Keep the same energy, chap.
You're just jumping out.
Did you just hear Tomo's point that he just made, which was a good one, by the way? Because Lewis definitely said that he was going to stay at Mercedes
and then Lewis got offered a 1-year contract, bro. like Lewis wanted ambassadorship and years. And then
He's dead in the sport.
And this is in the same vein. In the same vein, Nasha,
as it should be. No,
Max no longer has himself a car, and everybody, the team's acrimony. But the circumstances, Nasha, are very different today as at the 1st of the 8th, 2024, as versus this time last year. Wheatley's not there. Adrian Newey's not there. No longer do they have the dominant car. McLaren have the quickest. So it's a very... Jos Verstappen, all the chaos that's going on there. Christian Horner, allegation gate, and WhatsApp beefing with all of the Austrians, and the Austrians don't like the Typha. Mate, it's all kicking off. And the one thing that Max Verstappen wants to do in and amongst all the chaos is get in the car, put down his helmet and drive. He doesn't want his automotive bandwidth infringed upon by all this chaos and politicking and nonsense. And he is ultimately Max Verstappen 3, soon to be 4-time champion. So he has his pick of the litter. And if Toto's fluttering his eyelids at him, then it's Max's play, right? If he thinks that Mercedes are going to have the engine, the pole sitter Apex Predator engine in 2026, then he's Max Verstappen and he can do what he wants. Nasha, do you know what I mean? You can't hate him for doing that.
Oh no, for sure. I just
Absolutely
find it
not.
funny that absolutely fine for Max Verstappen to have the fastest car and to seek the fastest car, but when other drivers do that, then it's a big problem. But no, that's fine. That's fine. Look, I'm being very sarcastic. It's tongue in cheek. I want the best for everyone. I want the best for the sport. I think for me, I'm just saying I'd love to see George have what he's almost waited for. His whole Mercedes apprenticeship, has been kind of building to. I think they thought Lewis would retire by the time we got to this point. So I think it's been building towards him being a team leader. So I would just like to see that just for George. Otherwise, like you say, he's going to have to leave, and it'll be a shame if he has to leave and go into the midfield, because I think he's a top level driver.
Agree. No, I agree. Very well said, sir.
Can I just one last little thing, right? The situation that I think George finds himself in is very different to the situation that, say, Lewis found himself in 2014, or that even Max found himself in when he was sort of chasing these guys, right? The strength and depth in Formula One right now, and how tight the constructors are, means that it's much harder to put to be the head out of water. Is that even a thing? Versus everybody else, right? It's much harder to be the absolute apex predator when you've got a Max Verstappen, a Lewis Hamilton, a Fernando Alonso, a Lando Norris, a Charles Leclerc in competitive cars. Oscar Piastri, how did I forget him? If you got all of those guys circling, right, at any one point, you'd expect one of those drivers to be absolutely the best, and to criticize someone for not being there every single time. It's minuscule mistakes that are causing the problems that we're now focusing on. Right? But
Speaking of which, Shez, with a view not to bury the lead, speaking of mistakes, there's been a lot of conversation of late around McLaren and Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. I'm getting frustrated. I love Lando to death, but I'm getting a tad frustrated, Nasha, at Lando's level of self-deprecation and almost negative Nancy. Are we seeing Oscar Piastri put himself forth as our August 2024 as the number one McLaren driver now, by virtue of some of the mistakes that Lando keeps making, and he's almost his emotional / mental fragility by virtue of the down talking, etc.?
No, relax. I think
relax.
relax. No, I think look, Oscar's in great form, and Oscar's showing improvement time. What we're seeing from Oscar right now is great. What I would have loved is if Lando just gave that place back straight away in Hungary, and then was sat behind him for 10-15 laps, well, what's going on? Can I go past him now? I've swapped and I'm faster than him, because I think he was faster than him in that second phase of the race. And obviously, he would have got a bit of a lead from the undercut, but by all intents and purposes, he was faster in that second stage. And, Lando's first lap issues are what is killing him, really. And like Shez says, everyone's got their rough edges, right? Which need to be ironed out. And, I think Lando makes himself an easy target to dunk on, because in all honesty, he's extremely accountable, maybe too accountable and too publicly accountable. And I think that comes out. Me and Cam, we say this all the time. He's so British, that self-deprecating, that kind of sarcastic, deadpan, tone. That is just him. Does it transmit itself? Does it transmit itself well in the press? No, it doesn't. But I would rather someone who is really self-critical and understands what they need to do to get better and communicates that. I trust that person to carry on the trajectory that I think Lando Norris is. That guy. And he's been that guy for a long time now. And when McLaren have come good, I think was it 8 podiums this season. That is not to be sniffed at.
No, 100%.
But Oscar Piastri is also that guy. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's going to be a fascinating. The more experience Oscar gets on his tires and that race pace, because let me tell you now, if there's a move to be made, who do I trust out of Oscar and Lando? It's Oscar for sure, 100%. So I just don't think, as the complete package, I don't think that Oscar has enough in the bank yet for us to be saying that he's number one / team leader / the better driver of the two. But for sure, they're converging very quickly,
Mate,
if not already converged.
That Oscar Jack Piastri train is never late. Tomo, quick fire question: who are you picking? This feels like it's very reminiscent of a conversation we had many moons ago on the last lap. Oscar or Lando, chap?
What we're saying for a 25 title, who do I think will score more points next year? I would say Oscar.
Ooh.
That is my quick response. Make of that what you will, boys.
I don't hate it. I mean,
really?
Mate, I don't hate it. Nasher, he's coming.
No. Right. Okay. So succeeding at this game, and we've seen a lot of different characters and personalities dominating this sport. Lewis is in no way the same as Sebastian, was no way in the same as Michael, was no way the same as Ayrton. Carry on, right?
Yeah.
Who you are as a person, this is why we're invested in these human beings, and everyone's different. You can have vastly different. You can have a Kimi Räikkönen and a Daniel Ricciardo in the same field doing the same thing, yet they couldn't be more different as people. I think Oscar's got such a impressive mental game, and his just that way he's drilled, he's not going to lose that. And I think it's a lot harder if you're very emotional and very over the top and you get in your own head, which Lando's been I think definitely guilty of, and many of the greats over time have been guilty of how it affects their decision making. I think Oscar's got that. That's like I see that as like a foundation, and I don't see that as something that's really massively going to change. Oscar is who he is, and well, his one lap pace is already there with Lando. The qualifying head-to-head tells you all you need to know, right? The race pace isn't quite, but it's significantly closer than it was this time last year. You compare Hungary last year to Hungary this year, and it's chalk and cheese. And yes, he is. I still think Lando is the quicker racing driver right now. But remember, Oscar's 1.5 years into his F1 career. Lando's in his, what was it, 2019 was his first season?
2019.
So I think come next year, with all the increased pressure of there's going to be at least 4 teams, I think, fighting for a driver's title. I think the way that it's Prost-esque almost, Piastri, and he's just he's so measured.
Wow.
He's not the biggest character out of the car. He's not got the personality and the marketability of a Lando Norris or a Charles Leclerc or a Lewis Hamilton. But I think this kid is seriously special. And by next year, not quite now, but I think by next year he'll know what he needs to do, and I think he will be more consistent over the course of a season. You said it yourself, Nyesha, head-to-heads, who would you trust? And they're going to be a lot more head-to-heads going on when there's 4 teams fighting for a driver's title.
Mate. Can I just say, Shez, before you come in quickly, 2 secs, just to say that he has been a few inches away from dropping the car in a gravel track in like quite a lot of sessions this year. And I think there's fine margins between being incredible Prost-like mechanical efficiency guy and Charles Leclerc, and I just think, and that's like, well, that's what Charles.
Yeah, but
does,
he hasn't.
right?
He hasn't.
No, this is what I'm saying.
The fine line,
and that's for sure. And I love that. And I think, sorry, I should have said that was, I guess, in agreement with you. I do think the more he fine tunes that, the less of that we will see. I think the fact that he's kind of pushing to the limit and not crashing it and not dropping it is really good. And I think that's even going to get ironed out as well. So I do agree. Sorry, Shez, after you.
No, Shez, listen, as we round third base, I'm going to pitch another question at you because we've got another topic. Okay. We've got another topic to cover. It's not your fault, Nasha. That's poor chairmanship on my behalf. But I digress. Shez, there's been a lot of activity around the Bulls that are red this week, not least of which is the decision that they've made to keep one Checo Perez, formerly known as the Mexican Minister of Defense. Shez, why did they do that, bruv? Based upon his material underperformance as versus any benchmark worth its metal, His teammate Logan Sargent is out qualifying, barely makes it out of Q1 these days. The Taya Vidra family turned up at Hungary, and that's when he chooses to yeet it into the barrier. What's the reason, Shez? Why did Christian Horner overtype Helmut Marko and keep Checo Perez till at least post the summer break?
Yeah, so I've had a chance to chat about this at length, but I think it comes down to three things, right? The first is you have to ask yourself, is the performance that he is delivering at the moment, is it enough? On the face of it, you're going to say, no, it isn't. Max is winning races. He's not getting out of Q1. It's very evident that he is not getting the most out of that car. But you do have to think then, if you take him out of the car and put somebody else in, who's your alternative that is going to do better? And I don't think that Red Bull have got a viable alternative. And that comes from either a performance point of view or from a team harmony point of view. Like, I don't think they're going to stick Liam Lawson in the car and he's suddenly going to be on Max's level, or they're going to stick Daniel Ricciardo in the car, for example, given how he's performed at the RB so far this season and last, that he's suddenly going to be on Max's level. I think Red Bull thought he might be that guy, but he hasn't been. And they lost their opportunity with Carlos because they didn't want to upset the apple cart. And I think for the same reason, they didn't get Fernando. So your alternatives are really narrow. There isn't really anybody around that you're going to chuck him out and put somebody else in. And I think this has been a problem for Red Bull ever since they've had that second seat issue. Like, they had Gasly, it was always get him out of the car. Fine, but who are you going to put in the car? All right, we've got Alex Albon. Get him out of the car. Who are we going to put in the car instead? All right, fine, we've got Checo. Checo's the golden ticket. He's got tenure. He's got experience. He should be the guy. He hasn't been. So now you're like, okay, let's get rid of him. And it seems really easy to say, let's get rid of him. But I just don't see a really clear-cut person that they're going to put in that car. Now, if Red Bull had a Kimi Antonelli in the background who was chomping at the bit to get in that seat, I'd say, all right, fair enough, right? Checo has had his time, put that guy in. But it's not like Hajar is suddenly like lighting up F2. It's not like they have someone else that can do that. And the third reason is the commercial one, right? There's clearly a bit of loyalty going on there between Checo and Horner. I don't hate that. And he also has a massive commercial upside. We know that. Would Daniel Ricciardo also have a massive commercial upside? Yes, he probably would. But are you getting a performance advantage out of him? No, I don't think you are. So I think this is a question where if you look at it at face value, you think, yes, get rid of Checo, no question. But if you dig a bit deeper, you can kind of understand why there's been a bit of hesitancy and why he's still in that seat. I can see you shaking your head, but that's my reason.
Tomo, talk to me. Agree, disagree?
Okay, so I don't agree that performance in one car correlates to performance in that Red Bull. Per example, Pierre Gasly. So obviously did well enough in the Toro Rosso to get the Red Bull seat. Obviously that was more to do with Daniel Ricciardo leaving, so the opportunity presented itself fine. He took it. He was rubbish, jumped into the Toro Rosso, got the P2 in Brazil. 2021 in that Toro Rosso, was arguably one of the best drivers of the season, did fantastic in that car and always did well in that Toro Rosso. You look at Daniel Ricciardo. So he was really good at Red Bull, and he's the most recent driver to be able to take it in any way, shape or form to Max. Was really good in Renault as well. People forget about that. Jack Villeneuve definitely forgets about that. He was very good in Renault. Jumped into a McLaren and he's relatively nowhere. So I don't think that with all the evidence we've seen, and you can say maybe Alex as well, obviously he's only had Sargent and Latifi as teammates, right? You look at George relative to Latifi and Alex relative to Latifi, you can maybe glean some kind of comparison there. But ultimately, I don't think the performance in the racing bulls necessarily will correlate to how well they'll do in the Red Bull, because Yuki has over the course of the season been better than Daniel in the racing bulls, maybe not over recent races, but over the course of his entire tenure. However, that clearly doesn't really seem to correlate. It's not like 100% of the time, if you're good at one team, you'll be good at another team. There's certain drivers, Fernando, Carlos in particular come to mind, who wherever they drive, they seem to excel at and get up. To look at how Carlos came into Ferrari and was close to Charles very, very quickly. You know, him and Lando at McLaren, they were both like, he was there very, very quickly. And I just think that obviously Red Bull have all the data. I think this is now 3 times where it hasn't really worked. Let's be real. Even in 2021, Checo was a mile off Max. Like, Max outscored Lewis by the end, but Mercedes still won the constructors because Bottas, who had a bad season, like 2021 was not a good season for Valtteri over the course of his Mercedes career, still scored more points than Perez. Like, you look at the relative qualifying gaps, Checo's been a bit better, but not much, and it's nowhere near the gap it should be. So for me, the only driver who's demonstrated in recent times, and that maybe there's some kind of indication that they can, even if he's not doing a great job in the racing balls right now, is probably Daniel Ricciardo. He did 4 years at Red Bull, like 2014 to 2018. Like, they've got historic data on him. He's in a different stage of his career where he's going to be, I like to think, very prepared to settle, and he's like put it all on the line to go to Red Bull. Like, what is there to lose by chucking Ricciardo in? And then that's where the commercial argument and all that stuff comes up, because there's nothing to justify. Well, you could say it about anything. That's what a lot of make it political. See, a lot of people who still voted Tory, which I certainly didn't, even though I'm wearing blue today, would be like, well, yeah, but it's better to know the devil you do than the devil you don't. I'm like, what are you talking about? So we just stick with everything forever and nothing ever changes. That's a load of bollocks.
Let's go. I do not hate that.
That was a killer argument.
Nasha, as we round third base, talk to me about this Checo Perez. Has Christian Horner made an uncharacteristic, low-hanging, poor decision in keeping Checo Perez on?
Man, you know what? This is big boy podcasting right here, you know. This is elite level mic work that I'm listening to right now, because if my eyes could split in terms of where to look, where to go, like Shez and Tomo, your arguments, I just say, like, these men are hooping, bruv. I was like, at first I was with Shez, I was with Tomo. Then think about it. Look, I guess to put a pretty little bow on the pod today, 2 things can be right at the same time. And for me, I think, in all honesty, the only person they really could have put into that car was Daniel Ricciardo. Let's be honest, right? It was Daniel Ricciardo or bust. And I think personally that Christian has done his best. He's done if this was wrestling, Christian Horner, Daniel Ricciardo's in a title fight. Christian Horner's run down the ramp with a chair, with a sledgehammer, with some brass knuckles. He's hit the referee. He's done everything to help Daniel Ricciardo win this match. And he's still not got the 1, 2, 3. And I feel like Christian Horner's given Daniel every opportunity to get this Red Bull seat. And if Daniel Ricciardo had just done his job against Yuki, then even if he was marginally beating Yuki, even if he was beating Yuki because Yuki had like 4 DNFs or something, like, give us something to hang on to. Unfortunately, he hasn't. Look, I don't want to say the F word about Daniel, because the last time I said that, I got cooked into high heaven. Tomo, I'm sure you remember. But for me,
all too well.
For me, I just think, oh man, I wanted Daniel to do well. I wanted, because like you said, Tomo, and I think 2018 gets really skewed for Daniel, because at the point of signing that contract to go to Renault, he was the hottest property on the market. I think it was 2 wins for Lewis, 2 wins for Vettel, and 2 wins for Daniel Ricciardo. And then his engine just started going pop every other race, which absolutely skews. And I'm pretty sure that maybe the head-to-head in qualifying was probably better from Verstappen, but in the race, Ricciardo's engine was just going bang. And obviously he got the pole in Mexico. He probably should have won that race, but I think Max ended up winning that race. So I think Daniel is the only guy that we think or know could take it to Max out of the pool of drivers they had, but he's just not been able to prove it. And I think Christian has a sense of loyalty to Checo. And I think he's trying to spike Helmut Marko as well. Helmut Marko wants him gone. And I think Christian is using Checo as a pawn in this power battle. So to answer your question, I think he's made the right decision on sporting merit, but I don't think that Checo deserves to be in that seat at all. But also, Red Bull have made a rod for their own back, just chucking drivers out halfway through the season. If they just stuck with drivers for a whole season, no one would be saying it. But it's because they just started chucking people out halfway through the season. It was like, well, if that's the standard you're being kept to, people are getting chucked out for much less than what Checo's doing now. And I think that's where the pressure and the media comes from.
Gents, this is ultimate chaos. I've never disagreed with you guys collectively more than now. Nasha's out here throwing out terms like on sporting merit, that Christian Horner made the right decision by keeping Checo Perez. The dude can't even get out of Q1. Nasha, what are we talking about? He's been out qualified more times than I can mention by Logan Sargent in a Williams, for Pete's sake.
Okay,
he crashes.
in the car.
Right, well, exactly, mate. You've got many options, Nasha. The truth of the matter is, there's more risk attached to keeping Checo Perez than there is to getting rid of it. Put me in there, Nasha. I might be able to get out of Q1 more times than Checo Perez has this season. What are we doing, chap? It's not good enough. And flotsam jetsam F1, snowflakery and celebrating mediocrity. None of us are here for that, lads. I don't care whether Checo Perez is bringing in $30 million a year, or whether Liberty Media told Red Bull to keep him on so that they can continue selling tickets at the Mexican Grand Prix on the 27th of October. Like, I don't care about that stuff. All I know is this, that there is Teo Pourchaire, who's just won an F2 championship. Felipe Drugovich is sat on the bloody sidelines doing whatever else. Again, another F2 champion. And we keep celebrating mediocrity in the form of bloody Checo and Logan and Zhou. Like,
who are you putting in the car then, Cam?
Mate, anyone, Tomo. It's not even a question.
Who? No. Who?
I'm putting out.
It's easy to say, chuck him out. Who are you putting in the car?
Danny Rick would go in there. Danny Rick would be my pole sitter. I'd put Danny Rick in there in an instant. And again, it might not work out well. But how can it be any worse, gentlemen? How can it be any worse? They're about
Lando Norris put Daniel Ricciardo in a split.
Mate, that's fine. Whatever, Nasha, whatever. It cannot, listen, for the avoidance of doubt, it cannot get any worse than what Checo Perez is doing of late. It simply cannot, chap. Those guys at the Red Bull factory in Milton Keynes who are getting bonus on the back of constructor performance and constructor championship, they are spitting fire at this Checo Perez chap, who, by the way, in Belgium would have finished 8th again, but for George Russell getting a eighth, and he started 2nd, Nasha. So how very dare you, chap, talk about it's a good decision in the name of sporting merit?
I didn't say it was a good decision.
You said sporting merit is what you said.
Well, because on the basis that Daniel Ricciardo was brought back, he's not fulfilled his end of the argument. And I don't think it would be fair to put Daniel Ricciardo in that car over Yuki if we're talking about
fairness is
merit.
out the door. Fairness is out the door.
Well, exactly, but we're talking about sporting merit.
Because on merit, it would be Yuki, but I don't think it's going to be Yuki. Like, at the end of the day, all that matters is that what's going to get Red Bull the most constructors points to the end of the year. And the only way they're keeping Perez, at least for the next few races, right? Yeah. The only way that they go back to an old spec, maybe that it was more comfortable with earlier in the season, they maybe changed some engineering personnel. They tried to do that when Alex was there. I remember they brought Simon Rennie back in to try and fix that for Alex. It didn't really do anything. I don't know, maybe it did, but it didn't seem to help in the end. But all they're going to do is try and so they can get to the Mexican Grand Prix, right? Imagine if Red Bull drop in before then, the way Red Bull will be received would not be particularly positive. And I mean, Monza, Singapore, and Baku are 3 tracks where Checo has been able to perform in a Red Bull. So if he can't do it in them 3, it's 100% curtains.
But Tomo, even that, and I'll finish on it. So I apologise, Ches, but this has gone techie now. Even that, Tomo, how can you have a driver in a Red Bull racing car, for Pete's sake, who only functions around tracks that are rear limited by nature? I know he's a street king and he can go well around the Baku.
Shez, you're waiting to cook. Come on, Shez.
Let him cook.
But Cameron, this is not about the Red Bull in Max's hands. That Red Bull in Max's hands is a different animal. He's even said it himself. The problem is not Checo. The problem is the car. And when the Red Bull was winning races by 30 seconds, it was easy to paper over those cracks. As soon as it's in the mud, like Checo's doing what he was doing last season as well. But now he's in the middle of the pack. You talk about Belgium. He finished 7th. Where did Max finish?
No, but where did Max start? Shez, don't do that, Shez. This is disingenuous. You can't possibly say that in good faith. Listen, Shez. Here's the thing. Super quickly. I'm not saying that any of the other 18 on the grid are going to jump in there and just do what Max is doing. That would be a no. But it's a difference in extent, Shez, and not kinds. That dude can't get out of Q1, Shez.
Well, there's no guarantee
he was second last race.
There's no guarantee that anybody else is going to get out of Q1 either.
That's ridiculous.
And that's the problem that they have.
I can't entertain that.
Well, why is that ridiculous when Gasly and Albon couldn't do it either?
Did the same thing.
Get out of Q1, Tomo.
Correct.
There was plenty of time Alex and Pierre didn't get out of Q1. Yeah. Unfortunately, I remember.
Can I just say as well that you talk about Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, what are they? Adaptable. Whatever they drive, they're wrestling that thing into the points, into whatever. Daniel Ricciardo, what were we saying at Renault when he first started? Took a year, and then he got to it. But when he got to McLaren, everyone's like, he took a year at Renault. And he'll get better in the second year. What happened? It got worse. So you want him to jump into a car, which we've all seen and said here is one of the most difficult cars to drive, and smash it in 6 months. He's not even, I just don't even think he's a good candidate to go in that car, bruv. Like, respectfully.
But it is a team who's cooked out before. That's the only thing. That's the difference, isn't it? He's not going into a completely different foreign environment.
But in a different rule set. Like he was good in 2018.
But characteristics can carry over. Daniel struggled with that McLaren just as much in 21 as he did in 22, even though it was a difference in rule set and regulation.
Chaps, anything to put a bow in this very nice and neatly. Anyone at this point is better than Checo Perez. I think you guys are doing him a massive service and not criticising him in it. Once upon a time, he was a gangster, right? Street circuit dude, Turkey 21, etc., etc. Now, however, if F1 is a story told in tense, where your success is a function of what have you done lately even, that dude has been diabolical all season long. It's not good enough. I'm not expecting him to beat Max Verstappen every single race or compete with a Charles Leclerc, but to get out of Q1, to get out qualified by Logan Sargent, who's driving
we all see that.
We
all see that.
That's unacceptable, Tomo.
We all see that.
Put me in there,
Tomo. The solution is. That's what we disagree on. What the solution is.
Sub me on, Tomo. I can do that. If not getting out of Q1, if that's the criteria, sub me on, Tomo. Do you know what I mean? Like I might be able to. I'll do what. Mate, I think I can do that. Anyway, listen, you guys have been absolute legends. I've been Cameron F1. That chap at the top right of your screen even, he's been Tomo, the legend, 300k deep or whatever, round up to 400. What are we doing on YouTube? At Twomo F1 on Twitter, bottom left of your screen, that's been my guy Nasher of Quickstop F1 fame, at Quickstop F1 on Twitter, and Munch Club TV 2, bottom right of your screen, that's been Shez, the A side of the Tired F1 pod fame, at Shezmed on the Twitters. I've been your boy Cameron F1. Do me a favour between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.